Hi everybody, and welcome back to our show from This Corner TV. I'm your host and producer, Marilyn, Dayton, and I'm so glad you could join us today. You know why we're here. We're here to entertain you, but we're also here to talk about topics that both interest you and educate you. So remember, I'm going to keep telling you to get out those pens and paper to write things down, especially today, okay? I probably say that every time. But today,
especially today.
Yes. Today we're really fortunate to have with us Catherine Ewing, who is a transformational coach and consultant. And she's the founder of Emotional Freedom at Last. Now think about that for a minute. Emotional freedom at last. Whatever that means to you, that's what we're going to talk about, okay? We're going to tell you ways of finding that. Catherine has, for over 20 years, she has drawn on her wide range of training and experience as a spiritual life coach, emotional freedom technique practitioner, ordained minister of spiritual peacemaking, I like that, dream coach, that's interesting too, passion and purpose facilitator, psychotherapist, and energy healing practitioner to help people experience deep emotional healing, spiritual awakening, and profound personal transformation. That's why I say get your pen and paper out, okay? Because anything in her background might interest you, or all of it possibly, okay? So, Catherine, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm delighted to be here. And I have to add to the list one more thing.
Add it.
Recent grandmother might perhaps be the most important thing on the list.
I relate.
Which of course means I'm a mother as well, but the grandmother thing is, you know.
Yeah, that's a special phase in your life. I know.
Yeah.
I've been watching the pictures on Facebook. Adorable.
So cute.
What an exciting time. But you're here to tell us about how you can help us find emotional freedom at last. I like that, at last, because that's, you know, at certain times in our life we might find emotional freedom in some fashion, but we're talking about really finding it.
Yeah. I chose those words, Marilyn, very specifically because so many of I work primarily with women and some cool men, but mostly with women, tell me they've been in therapy, tried hypnosis or, you know, energy healing or maybe even medication, or they've done personal development programs or their minister or whatever, all wonderful things. And maybe they've done that for 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years and still haven't come to a place where they feel really at peace, living free from anxiety or the constant, you know, negative thoughts in their head. And so when we combine all of these things, the energy healing and the background in psychotherapy and the more spiritual approach, at last. And people say to me, oh my gosh, it took me 20 years in therapy and we never even got there. And in maybe one session or 2 sessions, we've really touched on things that are at the core, at the root of what's been creating, you know, whatever their emotional discomfort has been. So,
how do you guide them? Do you have some intuitive parts that come into play, or do you just ask them the kind of questions that really get right to it?
Well, I think it's a combination of intuition and, you know, a lot of training, and doing this for over 25 years now. So I always start right where the client is, and the presenting problem might be different. Someone might come in with, you know, just generalized anxiety that's now escalating to the point where they're having trouble driving, or they're not sleeping well, or they just can't quiet the, you know, sort of the mental delinquents, I call them. You know, that mind chatter. Someone else might come in because they're grieving the loss of a loved one. Someone else might come in because they know there's something in their background that they need to address, that they maybe don't really want to address, but they recognize that what I call the emotional residue of that, the thoughts that they may have developed about themselves or how safe they are in the world or not, it's finally time to deal with because it's holding them back. So people come in with a lot of different presenting problems, as it was. And sometimes it may be a person in business who maybe just have, you know, we've been talking about sort of the marketing piece a little bit and the branding, found that when they were working for other people, they could speak easily and market the other person, but when it comes to speaking about themselves and really putting themselves out front, all of a sudden they're stumbling and they can't find their words. And it may be traced back to childhood experiences of having been told they weren't smart or be quiet or you don't have anything to say that's that important. And all of a sudden now, when they're trying to speak up on their own behalf, these old patterns, these old energetic patterns are sort of getting triggered and coming alive, whereas they might not have when they were speaking for someone else, for somebody else's business. So it's very, you know, when we get into the subconscious, things can get very interesting and show up in very interesting ways.
Now you have clients from all over the world, right?
I
think
do.
You just
I
told
do.
me about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, for many years I was practicing locally. I say as a psychotherapist because people could come for therapy and use their insurance, but really I've always been very alternative because of my training in energy work and emotional freedom technique and also spirituality. But I was a practicing therapist, so people had to come to my office to see me. I've recently shifted over the last probably 4 years more intentionally to do more coaching and mentoring and speaking and workshops and retreats, and so I can work with clients anywhere. You know, I was just mentioning, last week I was on with a client from Austria and we did some tapping around her business. And, you know, I've had clients in South Africa and Australia, and so it's fun. You know, I can really work with anybody anywhere, and so it broadens my reach. I've always said I've wanted to work internationally, so now I can do that sitting in my office. I don't even have to get on a plane or get any shots or anything. That's great. Or locally, so people can still come to my office if they choose to do that, if they're, you know, in the area, or you know, distance. I say distance is, you know, not really a factor now.
Not anymore.
No.
Not anymore. So you do it by Skype?
I do it by Skype.
Now, what do you do, though, if you're talking to someone on the other side of the world who, for them, it's bedtime, and for you, you just woke up or something? I mean, how do you work out the time?
Well, that happens sometimes, but generally we can find, I'm pretty flexible with my time, so, you know, if it means early morning for me, which is maybe evening for them, or vice versa, you know, we try to find something that works. Although I was on a virtual retreat for a couple of days recently. I wasn't facilitating it, but I was on it. And one of the women was in New Zealand, and we started at noon, Connecticut time. The facilitator was in Arizona, so it was 9 in the morning her time, and the other woman was in New Zealand. It was 4 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my goodness.
So God bless her, like she was really committed. I was impressed.
Wow.
And the virtual assistant who was facilitating the whole thing was in the Philippines.
Holy cow.
So it was even a different time
everywhere.
for her, you know? So people do it if it's something that they really want to engage with. We usually figure out a way.
You mentioned tapping. I have to grab that while it went by quickly. I've heard about tapping, but can you tell us exactly what is tapping?
Tapping, when I use the word tapping, I'm referring to emotional freedom technique or techniques. It has been used to refer to other kinds of tapping modalities. And for me, I've been using this EFT, I call it Emotional Freedom Techniques, EFT, since 2006. And it's been referred to as acupuncture without needles. So we actually use the same system of Chinese medicine that an acupuncturist would use, the energy, you know, meridians that run through the body, and instead of inserting needles, we tap on different energy points, and you'll notice that the ones I'm tapping on are sort of bony and close to the surface, so you don't need to insert the needle. You can stimulate that energy point simply by the tapping, and we use a combination of words when we identify the problem and sort of what, I always check 3 different areas with people. So if they're saying they want to come in and work on a particular painful memory, right? That they know is still unsettled for them. As we're talking about that memory, if we decided that's what we're going to work on, I will check in with them and say, okay, so when you think about that experience, what do you notice in your physical body? Because mind, body, spirit are always connected, right? So what do you notice in your physical body? Because if it's a traumatic memory, when we experience a trauma, right? It's like we take an in-breath, and then it doesn't get released. It gets held. It gets stuck in the energy body. So emotions, energy in motion, the energy gets stuck. It doesn't move to sort of complete its circuit, if you will, and it gets held in the body, almost like a frozen something. So I will always check in and say, what do you notice in your body? And they may say, oh, I can feel this pressure in my chest, or my digestive system, or my belly is churning. Someone today was talking about she was feeling pins and needles in her legs as we were tapping on something. So I always check in to see what their physical experience is. And then I use that in what's called the tapping script, because as we tap, I just basically feed them back their language. So I try to get as much in our conversation as I can. So we'll talk about what's going on in their physical body. I might say to them, what any other thoughts that you have about that? I believe, that he left because I didn't deserve to be loved, or, whatever it might be, or I felt abandoned, or I was really confused, I didn't understand what happened, or I was so angry. So some of those are emotions and some of those are just thoughts. So then we'll separate out, okay, so what were the emotions? Angry. Okay, well, what else? Because usually the anger is like sort of the more aggressive, it's out here sometimes as a defense. So I'll say, okay, so what else? What's behind the anger? What's closer to your heart? Sadness, disappointment, fear, hurt, right? So then, and I will roll all of that then into a tapping script. And so we do something called the setup phrase, even though I was so, even though I'm so scared that my partner is going to leave me, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. So we would do a tapping setup 3 times and then start using some of the language. I was so scared, it broke my heart. I can feel it in my chest. It's pounding and it feels really tight. And we literally just tap on these points while we're just speaking the truth. So I always say to people, EFT is telling the truth along with a statement of acceptance. Because a lot of times in the past, somebody will say, I'm so afraid he's going to leave. And that's so stupid because I know he's not. Or I'm so stupid. Or I don't know why I always think that. And so usually the thing that we attach on the end is not very loving or supportive or self-soothing. So if we find a statement of acceptance, which is, I accept, this is true, I'm afraid he's going to leave, and I accept myself and my feelings, and I deeply love and accept myself, or I choose in this moment to accept my feelings. It creates a new association, and it creates new neural pathways in the brain. So we don't always have to go down those well-driven highways, right, or into the deep end of the pool. We now begin to create, yes, I'm having this feeling, and I can accept myself anyway. Yes, I'm having this fear, and I can love myself anyway. So it's really balancing those 2 pieces, the truth and the self-acceptance.
And all of this working together, the tapping helps you physically?
Yes, it helps on, thank you for that question, it helps on many different levels. You've heard of the fight or flight response.
No.
Right?
No. So
when we go into panic, or we have a panic attack, it's because our fight or flight response has kicked in. So there's this little part of the brain called the amygdala. It's about as big as an almond. And it's the emotional sentinel, if you will. So its job is to stand alert, right, to any potential danger. It's a very primitive part of the brain. It's like the oldest part of the brain, and it's all about survival. It is always scanning the environment for potential danger. So when we were cavemen or women, it really came in handy if there was a saber-toothed tiger in the neighborhood, right? Or a marauding tribe, or perhaps we were going to eat something that was poisonous, some little, something might go off about. So the sentinel is always, the amygdala is always looking for potential danger or potential threats. If it perceives a danger, it sends a message to another part of the brain called the hypothalamus, which then sets off a cascade of chemicals, adrenaline, cortisol, that literally starts to change the physiology in the body so that we're ready then to either fight this potential danger or hightail it out of there, fight or flight, run like hell, right? Oh, excuse me, whoops, run like crazy, I said. And so the body gears up for that. The heart rate changes, our breathing, our respiration changes, and one of the most important thing that happens is that the blood flows away from our prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that makes good decisions. Because right now, we're not in decision-making mode. We are either fight or get the heck out of here. So the brain doesn't want us to be thinking. The body doesn't want us to be thinking. It wants us to be acting. So the blood flows away from the brain. When we tap, and the science of this is not clear why this works, but it calms that fight or flight response. It like turns down the dial on that threat, on that perceived threat, and then the body can return to its resting state. Blood flows back to the brain, and then we can make better decisions. So it's a great modality, it's a great technique for just calming us when we're feeling afraid, over something that maybe is a potential threat, like, there's a car coming at us or something, or more like a perceived threat. We just got a call from our boss who said, could you step into my office, please? And we don't know why, right?
Yeah.
Or, it's maybe, saying something about my past. If I look up and I see a police officer behind me, whoops. After all these years, really? No. So there are things that, are actually dangerous. And then there are things that we just perceive as danger because we have so much stimulation now. Back in the caveman days, our base level, our baseline of, stress was about here. And then it would peak up in particular instances, and we would might go into that fight or flight response. And then once we realized we were out of danger or whatever it was had finished, we can come back down into that calm baseline. These days, we have so much stress, so much pressure, so much stimulation, so many things coming at us all the time that our brain is already in a very high state of alert. So it doesn't take much, like a call from the boss or from our kids' school or almost anything, to a glance, a word, something to send us up just high enough to trigger that fight or flight response. It's why we've seen an increase, or actually not even an increase, a whole new medical issue called adrenal fatigue, because our adrenaline, our adrenals are pumping, and we've got adrenaline running through our body much more than we're really made for, and much more than is healthy. So it puts stress on our whole system, and we have this adrenal blowout and fatigue. So there are many reasons why bringing down that high emotion, that high stress, is a good thing. And then over time, the effect of using EFT on old traumas helps to remove that residue that's held in our body, in our energy bodies. It helps to release that, because the energy, emotions are simply energy in motion. They're made to move through. They're made to just alert us to the fact that something is going on that might be in discomfort. It's not made to get stuck in the body and held there forever. So when we tap, just as when an acupuncturist inserts needles, it actually helps break that energy up, right? Like Drano for the energy field, and let it be released from the body. So over time, it's very helpful in releasing all those stored or pent up emotions that perhaps we have suppressed and not released, so that we're no longer as reactive because we don't have so much in us that we're carrying around that can get triggered. And that is such an important piece, that whole triggering. And I'm going to stop talking and let you ask another question, because I could just keep talking.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, I find it so,
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking, every day we go through something
Yes.
that is emotional, and maybe several times a day. And it doesn't matter what our age is, because kids, I'm thinking of 10, 11, 12-year-old boys who are so into their little video games, and they really get into those games. And I know my grandson does, and you'll hear him, and they're going, "No, you can't do that to me." And I'm thinking, oh, it sounds like he's at war or something. But to him, he is.
Right. Right.
And
And his body is producing the same exact chemicals as
Yeah.
it would be if he was actually in a real, violent or fighting situation.
which is kind of scary.
It's
you know,
very
when you
scary
think about
because it actually changes the brain chemistry. But that's a whole nother
Yeah, that's another show.
That's
folks.
another show. And I'm not an expert in that area, so I couldn't speak to it. But it does. It's recreating the same. It's setting off the same cascade of chemicals, and having the same response in the body, in the respiration, in the heart rate, all of that.
And whenever I talk to a doctor of natural medicine, and we know quite a few, I know quite a few, they're always telling me one of the main problems today is we all have adrenal drain continually.
Well, that's what I was referring to with the adrenal
exactly.
fatigue. Yeah.
And whenever we're tested, our adrenals they come up being very deficient.
Because we never actually drop down into that really restful place where our body gets to regenerate and heal itself in the way that it used to. All the constant stimulation is always keeping us in a false state of alert. I call it this false sense of urgency. Facebook, text messaging, like we're always thinking that we have to be responding to something, and there's never, you and I are of an age where we can remember, with my father, he would leave his office and he would drive home from work, and that would sort of be his decompression time.
Exactly.
And by the time he got home, generally he had left work behind and would come in, to be with the family. And then we got those boxes in the front seat. That was the car phone, right?
Oh, gee, they were big, yeah.
Yeah, they could be on the phone from the time they left the office till and it's just progressed since then. So there's really never any downtime. Even when we sleep, the kids, they've got the phones on their bedstands.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
they're buzzing and they're going off and they're, even as they're trying to sleep.
And that's, we kept talking about all of these sad things that are going on. But what it is just the state of the way it is today. Things have changed. My dad used to come home, and he kept his hat in the car, okay. So he'd come home, he'd pull in the driveway, he'd take his hat and put it on his head, and then he'd get out of the car, walk in the house, and take his hat off and put it down, and he'd say, okay, my work hat is off.
Great.
I mean, literally,
Great.
so that he could relax.
Yeah.
And it was what he did to physically show that he
that part of his day was complete, and he was now here.
And so many people come home from work with a frown on their face, and they're still not quite totally with you. I know when I was, well, I'm not going to talk about counseling too much here, but when I was going through a separation time with one of my husbands. What can I say? I was told, give him an hour from the time he gets home from work. Leave him be for an hour so that he can settle his mind and get, but sometimes that wouldn't work.
Right.
And with me, sometimes it didn't work. There were times when I would come home late from work. When I had my own ad agency, when I was running a publishing business, there was just so much on my mind continually that it was hard to relax, which is why I say husbands, because I couldn't, I just couldn't get rid of it enough to be relaxed and enjoy what was. in the moment kind of thing.
Right. There's, there are some statistics around, and I don't know where this number originally came from. I imagine somebody walking around with one of those old clickers. But they say, adults, American adults, it might be different elsewhere, have about 70,000 thoughts a day. Wow. 70,000. About 85% of them are just repetitive. We kind of are thinking this, not exactly the same words or whatever, but same ideas, same themes, right? Same things that just keep looping through our mind. And about 90% of them are negative or unsupportive.
Oh, wow.
Worries, fears, negative self-talk, concerns, money, health, kids, aging parents, job, whatever it happens, finances, whatever it happens to be. So, if you do the math very quickly, that's about 50,000 thoughts a day that aren't necessarily supporting our well-being. That's a lot of negativity being created in the internal environment. The other piece of that that's, equally amazing is that, and I don't know the numbers on this, we're very rarely in the present moment. We're either in the past, reliving something, retelling that story, thinking about something, being in blame or guilt or resentment or anger about something that happened and how we were treated unfairly and how he did me wrong or whatever, whatever that is. Or we're worried about the future. We're worried about, paying the bills, or we're worried about our health, or we're worried about our children or our grandchildren. Or am I going to be able to make this business go? I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. I understand that never letting go of the business. It's just there all the time. So we're very rarely right here in the present moment with whatever is happening right now.
And that's
the only place where we can really be at peace.
You know what I found my moments are, and a lot of people do this, they will either meditate or they get a massage. Those are my two moments when I am relaxed totally, because my whole face changes.
Yeah.
If you've ever noticed, if you've gone and gotten a massage, make sure you look at your face. I know we're always looking at our hair, got messed up, but look at your face.
How's that mascara? Is it running down my face?
Yeah. It's like, okay, I've got massage head, right? Right. But look at your face and notice less frowns. It's more relaxed. And you look maybe 5-10 years younger, depends on your current age. And the same thing with meditating.
Yeah. Well, good for you that you can do that with meditation. Many people can't. And I've got one of those monkey minds. Some days I can, and I've been meditating for over 20 years. Yeah. Some days I can get very quiet, and and other days it's harder to turn that mind off. And on those days I might listen to a guided meditation because it'll give my mind something to do while I can drop down into a quieter place. For me, walking, getting out in nature. I used to be a long distance runner. I'm not doing that anymore. And I miss it because it was a great way for me to just let go of stress. I could get out and run and but I can't do it anymore. And so getting out in nature, walking, moving your body, singing, dancing. I mean, there's so many ways that we can get out of that busy mind and be more fully present.
And I didn't want to give the impression I could go like that. Sometimes it takes a while, and I have to meditate longer because it took me a while to relax and stop my brain.
Yeah.
And I have the same problem at night when I'm going to bed.
And you know what I do?
What do you do?
I tap.
Oh.
Even though my mind is really busy right now, and it's hard to get quiet and settle down, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. I can do a few minutes of tapping and come right down, and then I can go into meditation much more easily. Same thing if I'm not falling asleep, or if I wake up in the middle of the night and I have insomnia, I'll start tapping. Within moments I'm yawning, and then I'm back asleep again. I've trained my body, and because of the relaxation response that it brings on, it's a great thing to use for quieting the mind, to move into meditation, or if I have to sit down and write, and really be focused, I'll do some tapping first just to get myself, kind of in a more focused state of mind. There are so many uses for emotional freedom technique. it's just mind-blowing to me. And
I'm sitting here thinking of it myself
Yeah.
because the other day I was supposed to be creating something, writing something, and I sat there and instead of a blank page, it's my dog's face staring back at me on my computer. And I'm just, like, okay. So I changed the picture on the computer and I'm going, I can't get anything out. So tapping can help that.
Yeah. I've taught tapping at local companies to employees who have to do presentations and have presentation anxiety. So whether they have to do a presentation to one other person, we were talking about earlier, or whether they have to do a presentation to a group of people. So, and the tapping isn't just for the moment when you're going to stand up and do the, just before you're going to stand up and do the presentation. It's everything from, even though I don't know what to write, even though I'm having trouble making an outline, even though I'm procrastinating and I know I've got to get this done and I'm doing everything else but sit down to do this. I deeply and completely. So it's everything from the preparation to, the actual presentation itself, even though I feel like I have to run to the bathroom as soon as I have to get up. So there's just so many ways to utilize emotional freedom technique. I mean, I primarily use it with clients around trauma, but trauma can show up in a lot of different ways. I was talking about this client in Austria the other day, and the way that we got connected was that through my coaching program, we were talking about making videos to promote yourself. I was amazed at how many people were terrified at the idea of making a 2-minute video to promote themselves or their business. So I offered some sessions to people, and I ended up working with this woman from Austria, and she was terrified about getting in front of the camera. And as we started tapping, within minutes, she remembered experiences in school where she was humiliated, where she was bullied, where she was made fun of, experiences in high school where a group of girls, mean girls, I guess, just decided that she was going to be the one whose year they were going to make miserable. And it was awful. It was awful, to the point where she just decided it was safer not to show up. It was safer to hide. She started growing her hair, hanging her hair in her face. She put weight on. And then she went to work in a company, and the first meeting, then when she was actually there, 2 weeks on the job, her boss called her out and humiliated her. I thought you were an expert in this stuff. She'd been on the job for 2 weeks. She was a young woman. And she still works for that same company. But she made a decision that it was safer to just fade into the shadows, do her job quietly, not draw attention to herself. And she hadn't connected. And that's the beauty of the work that I do. It's making the connection between all of these past experiences and what's happening right now in this moment. I can't make this stinking video. Every time I go to do it, I have a panic attack, or I forget what I'm going to say, or whatever's going on. And the fear was, when we actually got right down to it, because she grew up in a small town in Austria, that those same girls, 20 years later, were going to see her on Facebook, and were somehow going to begin to make her life miserable again.
And that is very important to most of us. We're going to take a little break now, but when we come back, I want to get a little bit more into the emotional baggage that we carry around with ourselves that can block us, get in the way, keep us from feeling emotionally free. Getting that
and therefore
freedom.
Stepping into all we can be, because it's like anchors, holding us back.
So that's what we're going to talk about when we come back. Okay?
Cool.
We'll be right back.
Can you help me with this? My new dad teaches me all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
He helps me with homework.
That would be 3.6795.
Thanks.
Yep.
He helps me with my decision making.
I wouldn't use this one. Ever.
And he's even teaching me how to drive.
And that's why cars have bumpers.
I'm learning so much.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are.
When
When some people struggle with their mortgage payments, they become frozen, petrified. Not knowing what to do, they do nothing. But the people who take action are far more likely to get the most positive outcome. Making home affordable is a free government program. Call now to talk one-on-one with a housing expert about the options that are right for you. Real help, real answers, right now.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
Oh gosh, that was funny. I'm here. I'm here with Catherine Ewing, and we were watching those 3 PSAs, and she said they need to learn how to tap.
Everybody needs to learn how to tap.
Everybody needs to learn how to tap.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about tapping as a form of EFT. You call it
Emotional freedom technique. Yep.
And it sounds like it's very effective, and something that I need to do. A lot of us need to do. But one of the things that we've also been talking about is people who have an issue that blocks them or keeps them from being who they really want to be, or keeps them blocked up so that they can't be who they want to be. They can't feel peace or security in who they are. And a lot of it is emotional baggage from the past. Mm-hmm. So you help people discover what is holding them back.
Yeah.
It could be anything from abuse to bullying to a variety of things.
Right. I like to call myself an emotional archeologist.
I like
Right.
that.
We lovingly and carefully dig up the broken pieces and brush them off and actually see what the story was around them, and then begin to do the healing around those pieces, those different memories, those different experiences, those different beliefs that someone might have developed, about herself or himself, given their background or where they came from, and then put them together in a different way and create like a new beautiful mosaic and story about who they really are. Because what I have found, Marilyn, is that for many people, the deepest wounds, the things that have been the most potentially harmful, when we can tap in and understand and remember those and really give them the space to heal, then they become our greatest gifts. I mean, we know people who have taken really difficult, painful life situations, done their healing work around them, and are now in the world, telling their story, helping other people heal. And so that's what I love to do, bring the stuff that's in the shadows. I call it pumping the septic tank, bring the stuff that's been pushed into the shadows for good reason, right? Because it was scary, because it was unsafe, because whatever. And lovingly bring it to the surface and say, yes, this was part of my story, but it's not who I am, because my nature is divine. Right? I am made in the same blueprint, the same image, the same stuff as the energy, the consciousness, the God, whatever word you want to use, that created me. So this is a story. These are life experiences. And I've drawn certain conclusions about myself. I've told myself certain things. Other people have told me certain things based on those experiences. But they have nothing to do, really, with the truth of who I am at my essential nature, at my authentic core. So that's where the spiritual awakening, we talked about healing, spiritual awakening, and profound transformation, because when we begin to understand that all of those experiences were part of our growth, our learning, and now when we can heal them and use them to step into really the truth of who we are, then that's a beautiful process.
That is, absolutely.
Yeah.
I know we've all got emotional baggage that we've had to either tuck away or actively overcome. What I'd like to do is I'd like to ask you, of all the, you have so many experiences, so much training, it's almost too much
that
to comprehend.
alphabet soup behind my name.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I was a credential chaser, you know.
I would like to know if you would like to share with us some of the emotional, tough moments that you've had in your life that have helped transform you and helped put you on the path that you're on now. If you could share that with us.
Yeah, sure, I would. You know, I'm drawn specifically to two periods in my life.
Okay.
And the first was when I was, interestingly enough, at the same exact place in her life that my daughter is right now. I was 22 years old. I was actually engaged to be married. My daughter is not. But it was in my last week of college. So I had finished my final classes and was preparing for exams. And my mom passed away in that week. And so instead of partaking in my graduation ceremony and all of that, we laid my mom to rest. And so I had this experience, and I had, you know, gotten a fair amount of honors in college. I was the president of the Women's Caucus, and I was Sociology Student of the Year, and I was graduating, whatever the cum laude, whatever the highest level was. So it would have been quite a celebration. And instead of being able to enjoy that and, you know, be in that moment, I was dealing with the sudden death of my mom. And I was getting married 2 months later. And so we decided to go ahead with the wedding because we were, my then fiance, husband, and I were moving out of state immediately after the wedding. And so we decided to go ahead with it. But, you know, for a young woman to be then making those plans, you know, doing the rest of that pretty much on my own. My dad was really not in any shape to help. I have 6 brothers, so, you know, brothers are not really useful in those. And my sister is 12 years older than me and didn't live in the same state. So that was a, you know, a period of loss for me. I mentioned briefly that when I was in high school, actually also in my senior year of high school, 8 of my friends died of bizarre accidents, tragedies, you know, in a very short period of time. So there was a, you know, a lot of loss and, like, sort of, for me, kind of a dark night of the soul, losing my faith. Like, why is this happening? Why are all these young people, why are my friends, you know, being taken? The loss of my mom, and then, so my mom died 2 months before I got married, and then my dad passed away 2 months before my first child was born. So again, another experience that should have been joyful, and, you know, we had gone through infertility. We, you know, there were a long time, you know, leading up to the birth of my oldest son, and my dad passed away 2 months before my son Ian was born. So lots of loss sort of in the early part of my life. A lot of it that sort of got stuffed because my mom died, you know, I had a wedding to attend to and then move out of state and, you know, look for work and kind of went on with my life without really doing the grieving. And I come from a large Irish Catholic family. I just mentioned 6 brothers and a sister, and for a while my grandmother and aunt lived with us. But when my mom passed, it was like, boom, the hub sort of blew out of the wheel. So any idea that I had about what my life and life with children as a married woman and mom was going to look like just went away, because my kids never had the experience that I had growing up with lots of people around and lots of activity and coming and going, because everybody's sort of scattered, you know, so my siblings were sort of all over the United States. And then, you know, obviously the experience when my dad passed before my son was born, so now neither of my parents were alive to be grandparents to my children. So, you know, that was a very painful time.
Well, also your father died 2 months before you had your child, so you didn't, once again, you didn't have that period of grief available
I'm
to
so
you.
yes, thank you. That's I've sort of lost my way there, but that's what I was going to say. So, you know, I lost my dad, and then I became a mom, and, you know, how all-consuming that is.
Absolutely.
And so again, sort of whatever processing, whatever feelings, whatever grief was very short-lived, you know, my ability to grieve, because I was pregnant and then delivered this baby and, you know, sort of moved on with that part of my life. So there were a lot of things under the surface for me that I didn't realize were impacting me and creating maybe some mild depression or anxiety or, you know, different issues in my life. And just not to mention the sadness of not having my parents present, and then not feeling, you know, even to this day, there's a sense that I have in the world of not always being supported. Like, because when your mom, you know, for me, my kids are always in my thoughts, right? Yeah. They're just always on my mind. And so when your mom isn't in the world, you don't really ever have that feeling that I think, you know, if you have a healthy, emotionally, you know, healthy mother, that somebody's always got my back. Yeah. You know, there's always somebody I can call, there's somebody I can pick up the phone, ask this question of, especially I had 3 children, raising children, you know, my mother-in-law and I didn't really have that kind of relationship. So there was a lot of time where, you know, I was competent and I got on with my life and I didn't wallow in it, but, you know, when things came up where I felt unsupported in my life, and that still shows up sometimes for me. And then the other period of time for me that was most difficult, so that was about an 8-year period between, you know, my mom's passing and my dad's passing. And then I made a very, very difficult decision in 2007 to leave my 30-year marriage. And although leaving the marriage was difficult, the more difficult part was leaving the children, because I moved out. And so my kids, who were then 14, 16, and 21, stayed with their dad, you know, in the house that they grew up in, because I had no interest in upsetting their lives any more than they already were. Yes. And, you know, that was incredibly painful for me. And again, it was this period of time where I had just, a few years earlier, finished ministerial school, and I had opened a healing center called Spirit Matter. So I had left my paid employment. I had worked for the state of Connecticut and as a consultant, and then I had been in private practice as a psychotherapist. I left all of that, and I opened a healing center. So I was on my own financially as a businesswoman. You know, social workers, we don't really make good businesswomen. We're all about helping people. The bottom line, really, sort of. So that was challenging, you know, not being an entrepreneur, opening the healing center, leaving my marriage. When I left, I moved into a one-room studio basement apartment. I had 2 gay men, 4 dogs, and 2 cats living above me. And all I took with me from my 2,500 square foot house in the suburbs, right? Really suburban lifestyle, right? Soccer mom, van, taking kids all over town. I took my daughter's twin bed, a dresser, and my clothing. And I moved into a basement apartment where I lived for 18 months until I could kind of get my feet back under me again, all the while trying to run my own business, you know, running the healing center, and figuring out how to be single really for the first time in my life. I was married when I was 22, and I was 52 when I left my marriage. So everything that I knew in my life was completely upside down and inside out. Wow. And it was really, you know, like starting over again at age 52. And trying to negotiate the relationships with my kids who weren't living with me anymore, and the relationship with their dad, and the new business, and menopause. And, you know, I mean, it's like, what's going on here? Is it the grief, right? Is it the loneliness? Is it the menopause? Is it the stress of trying to start a new business? I mean, everything just sort of in one big messy ball of wax. So I love to help women navigate through transition, because I've been there, done that. Yes. I've walked that talk, and I wouldn't recommend doing it the way I've done it to everybody. But that's the way it happened for me. And
I think it means a great deal when you help people and you've been where where they are,
I
so that
think
you can understand.
part of my spiritual path has been walking that talk, if you will, because I, as a coach, so I was transitioning into my coaching practice during this time too, and I felt that in order to be in integrity, in order to really ask people to commit to doing the healing, to really looking at where they were in their lives. You asked me earlier on, how do I work with people? With some people we do an assessment and we look at all the different areas of their life: money, work, relationships, health, joy, and really take an honest look at where are you in each of these areas on a scale of 1 to 10. Are you at a 10? Do you love this? Or are you at a 2 in your relationship? And what's going on with that? So to really invite and hold people accountable and support them in the coaching process, I had to be willing to do that deep dive myself. That's just the way I feel about it. Otherwise, I'm out of integrity. I can't ask you to do what I'm not willing to do and what I haven't already done. The details might be a little bit different. Your story is not my story, and it's going to happen, it's going to unfold differently. But the willingness to go in and do that shadow work, to pull up the pieces, to be honest with yourself, to face the things that might be difficult to face, to make the decisions that might be difficult to make, or at least look at it and then say, no, I'm not willing to do that. All right, this may not be great, but I'm going to stay for these reasons. Okay, at least be honest with yourself about that.
Exactly, yeah. So it's in a way, you're committing and they're committing.
Yes, yes. And I work best with clients who will make that commitment. I can't fix you.
Yeah.
I can't fix your situation. In order for there to be real healing, really awaken to who you are, what you showed up on this planet to be, who you showed up here to be, and then to step into that transformation, you've got to do the work.
Yeah.
You've got to do the work. You can't play the victim role. You can't be in the pity party. Yes, we're going to look at those emotions, we're going to work with them, we're going to bring them out, but not to wallow there, to use them now as a springboard, as an understanding about these different things that happened and why they might have happened. And the other thing, and this is going to sound probably a little woo-woo to some people, is that we don't only deal with what happened in this lifetime. Often when I'm tapping with people, they will have flashes of maybe things that happened in other lifetimes. I can't say for sure, but the visuals, the whatever, and the emotion that's so raw in that moment says to me, wow, this is something they've experienced before. So they've been carrying it in their cellular memory, literally from other lifetimes, or in their own genetic line. Maybe every woman in their family has been silenced or suppressed in some way, and now this woman who's sitting in front of me can't speak her truth. I had a client who literally was having trouble, marketing her own business. And as we were tapping on that, she had a vision of all of her female ancestors going back many generations who had throat cancer, thyroid cancer, mutism, all of these experiences and expressions of them not being able to use their voice, of having had their voice taken from them. And yes, there was abuse in these relationships. There was abuse in that marriage.
Wow. So
there was violence in the family system.
So that's why she couldn't find her voice.
Exactly.
Whoa. That is
it goes deep.
Interesting.
It's very deep work. And that's why it's profoundly transformational, because we're not skimming on the surface. We're not playing in the shallow end.
Yeah.
We're going in the deep end. We're going down the rabbit hole. And not in a way where we're, it's not that. It's moving the energy, addressing what's already there. It's already in you. People who, I'm a teacher of the law of attraction as well, and sometimes people say, well, the law of attraction, I'm not supposed to focus on the negative. And I said, yeah, but have you ever painted a wall? Yeah. Don't you have to scrape the crud off the wall, the mold, the mildew, the old peeling paint, take the wallpaper off, spackle that wall, Don't you have to do the prep work before you can put that new beautiful color over it? Absolutely. Because if not, it's just going to bleed through, and your new beautiful color isn't going to look so great.
Exactly.
6 months or a year or whatever down the road. This is the same thing.
That's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah, it's
I
a good
like that.
analogy.
Yeah,
you
it
know,
is.
it's a little
very
nicer
good
than pumping the septic tank, but
one.
it's basically
Yeah.
but it's basically the same thing, because we're in a period of time, and again, I don't want to get too woo-woo with all this, but we're in a period of time cosmically where there's a lot of energy coming onto the planet. It's why so many people are experiencing change. It's time for us to let go of this stuff from the past that's not serving us. But the light has to have some place to go. We are literally being bombarded with more and more light than we ever have been. So we have to clear the way to let the light literally come in and embody it. It's why so many people are experiencing so much change.
You know, I have talked to a lot of people who've been experiencing change. I've experienced a ton of change. And we could probably do another show on change. Because we're running out of time.
But it's being supported cosmically, literally. It's a cosmic thing that's going on. And we're all feeling it. Our systems are feeling it. Our banking system are all, and we're feeling it individually. Where things that are not serving us any longer, whether they're old patterns or whether they're relationships or jobs or where we're living, all of a sudden it feels like, ooh, this isn't working for me.
And you know what? I hope all of you that are watching are relating to what she's saying, because we're all changing. And if you're confused about anything, she's there's her phone number right there.
There it is. Call
there
me.
it is. But you know, one more quick thing before we go, which is you've got something coming up, a retreat.
Yeah.
And there's the information to go and sign up. What's the date?
It's July 31st, so we're in 2015, in case this is shown in another year.
Okay.
So it's a one-day women's retreat called Unlock Your Emotional Freedom Now, just for women at Mercy Center, right here, right in the neighborhood, right in the hood.
How great is that?
So they can go to my website, and that's the /UYEN takes you to a page with more information, and also where you can register. July 31st, Mercy Center, women only. We had one last year. It was awesome. So it would be really lovely.
And you know what? That's a great idea. So why don't you plan to do that? Okay, go to that
I'll be
website right there, and because what she's been talking about, we all need to think about. Okay. And I thank you so much for being
You're welcome.
on the show. It's
always
been
my
wonderful.
pleasure.
And I
as
think
you can tell, I can talk forever.
Well, I think the two of us, we could go on and do another show here. But as you know, I like to finish with a quote. And I came up with one. It may not be perfect, but it's about change and transition. And it's from Jack Canfield, who is responsible for the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. He said, look at it as an opportunity to really go after what you want to accomplish in life and make a difference in the world, which you can't do if you are not clear, if you're not you. The key is to take small, conscious steps and prepare yourself for a successful transition. And her retreat will help you do that.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Because we will. It'll be experiential. I'll teach some tools and techniques and how to look at challenges as opportunities for growth.
I love it. I love it. So as always, thank you so much for joining us. And we will be back next time. Join us then. Thank you.
Thank you.